Begin with the words of the invocation. Toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. Greetings and welcome. It's a beautiful day. The sun is shining and the flowers are in bloom and the birds are twittering in the trees and the ducks are frolicking in the ponds. And speaking of ducks, I want to tell you a story about a duck. It was just yesterday. We were walking beside a pond, and there was a duck. A mother and child came along, and the child ran toward the duck and was quacking, greeting the duck with quacks. Now, what did the mother say? She said, "Be careful. You don't know what you might be saying in duck language." Those words really struck me. And I kept thinking about that. I was reminded that it's for a very good reason that in India, the mother is the first guru. She was imparting some wisdom here. You don't know what you might be saying in duck language. If only we all knew the language of the birds. Solomon, legend tells us, knew the language of the birds and accomplished remarkable things because of that knowledge. But in our time, we are lucky if we know our own language well, let alone the languages of others. There was a time, the Bible tells us, when everyone knew the language of one another. All human beings spoke the same language and could understand each other. But then the people all gathered in a city. That city was called Babel. And they began to build a tower that reached higher and higher into the sky toward the divine presence. And that tower was struck down by act of God. And human tongues were confused, which is to say, people no longer spoke the same language. There was then a multiplicity of languages. Why did this happen? The ordinary interpretation is that it was hubris that made the people of Babel try to reach heaven. They overreached. And because of their overambition, their vanity, they were humbled. Pirzadi Shahida Noor gives a somewhat different interpretation when she comments on this story. She says that the tower represented the intention that all beings have to come near God, to unite with God, to unite with the One. But they were prevented from that unio mystica, because if all beings in the universe at this moment simultaneously attained a merging in consciousness with the Absolute, then the multiplicity of worlds, the multiplicity of beings, the multiplicity of stories would vanish. And so it is providential that the divine unity has brought forth this multiplicity, these myriad angles of vision, which in their multitudinous perspectives constitute the elaboration of this multi-tiered intersubjective reality. And that intersubjectivity then brings forth a multitude of languages, cultures, ways of being, not only on the collective level variously, but even among individuals. Every individual has his or her own unique angle of vision. And even everyone has a language. And sometimes the multiplicity of languages is so bewildering that we find ourselves stymied and frustrated in situations where it's hard to connect with other people. Perhaps one's intentions aren't understood, or perhaps one doesn't understand another person's intentions. And oftentimes there's goodwill, but because of a mutual misunderstanding, that goodwill is missed. Now, sometimes there isn't goodwill, sometimes there is ill intent, but even that ill intent belongs to a certain language of understanding, because ultimately, deep down, we're all seeking the good. We're all seeking the good. Sheikh Al-Akbar says that it is the beloved, it is God, that every lover loves in every beloved. So even when there is a mode of being that is sideways and not straightforward and even harmful, even there, if you dig down deep enough, the deepest motive is one of love, connecting to love. But not all strategies for realizing the fulfillment of love are equally successful or transparent, clear, luminous. There are efforts to realize the goal of love that are self-defeating and fraught with confusion. So there are so many languages, so many varying understandings, so many missed chances to see eye to eye. And in a sense, the divine will doesn't wish for a complete unanimity. If there was a total unanimity, we would enter total silence. Have you noticed? The more that you are in tune with someone, the less words are needed. Eventually words fall away. You're no longer thinking separately. You enter into this deep harmony, which becomes more and more simple. So at the grandest level, the apotheosis of that harmony of all people would bring about, and one day will bring about, the Qiyamah, the end of times. But so long as this world is meant still to subsist, there will be differences, there will be forgetting and remembering. There will be different ways of doing things. There will be misunderstandings, and the attempt to find common ground. So you might say, far up, high above, there is the perfect unanimity of haqiqat, of the absolute. And down here on the ground, there is fighting in the streets. What we have to find is the union of the opposites. Bring something of the great silence into speech. Bring something of our mutual knowing into the silence. That's why Murshid says, may the heavens be reflected on the earth, Lord, that earth may turn into heaven. So even if this earth is not meant to be a place of absolute unity, we can find unity in spirit even amidst uniformity of form. And what helps is goodwill. What helps is the attempt to look for common ground, to meet another where you can, to find a basis for mutuality, reciprocity, sympathy, understanding, and build from there. And one may find that you begin to learn new languages. You might even find that what one was arguing about for so long was not so necessary after all. And that's illustrated in this wonderful story Maulana Rumi tells of the travelers traveling together from different lands, speaking different languages and not knowing each other's languages, but becoming hungry along the way and stopping at a caravanserai where there was a little market, each of them bringing forth a coin, the coins gathered together to purchase something to satisfy their hunger. But now each wanted to assert the person's preference. So the Turk insisted, uzum, and the Persian said, angur, and the Arab, la, anab, and the Indian said, draks. And so each one was asking for something different, and they became annoyed with each other, actually. They had been traveling nicely along the way, but now they became annoyed and really repeated their demands, and they were pushing and shoving a bit. And someone came along that spoke all of the relevant languages, grabbed the coins, disappeared, came back with a tray full of grapes. They all smiled because that's what they were all asking for. So, may we learn the language of the ducks. And short of knowing that language, we can ask ourselves or remind ourselves, as that wise mother reminded her child, are you sure you know what you're saying in the language of the ducks? When you speak with someone, do you know what your words are going to mean to that person? It may be different from what your words mean to yourself.